Thank you, everyone. It's always nice to come back here. I was driving here, and a friend of mine, mine and I, who's a psychologist in Arizona, she and I are giving some thought to like a forgiveness podcast, and she's trying to get money for it, and blah blah blah. And I told her I was pulling up to a church to give a talk. And I told her that my vague memory of the first time that I talked here was 20 years ago. And I remember, Father Mac introduced me, and it was like I'm standing here and I'm thinking, I'm a Jewish kid from the Bronx. And I'm speaking in an Episcopal church. I'd never even been in an Episcopal church before. And now I was reflecting as I was walking up here just how comfortable and warm it feels to come back here after all these years and all the nice people that I have met doing this. It's like I felt it was my own, or a little piece of cross-cultural dialogue. And one other memory I had, and then I'll bring, one time, at the very beginning when I came here, I tried to dress a little more appropriately for church. And I don't anymore, but I did for a while to kind of be respectful. And I remember one day, like this morning, I drove here from my home, just coming here now. And one morning, I just was running around and I didn't remember. And I showed up here in Stanford sweatpants and a t-shirt. And I saw Father Mac and I said, ooh, I should probably be better dressed than that. He said, don't worry about it. So I gave my talk, and then the next time that I showed up, Father Mac greeted me in sweatpants and a t-shirt. And so, I can't help but that kind of little interchange is at the heart of religion. That some desperate need for us to be kind in the absolute smallest of ways. If there's any purpose to us meeting like this, that's it. To remind us, to help us connect to whatever part of ourselves that can do that. That otherwise I don't see enough value. The thing that precipitated this was my friend was telling me that when I called her, I told her I'd be driving to St. Helena, and when I called her, she was online at the supermarket. She was with her husband, and she told her husband, well, I need a few minutes. So the husband took the stuff, but then we got on this hour-long conversation, and she kept on telling, I need a few minutes, so he's driving and unloading the packages and doing the whole deal. And when that was happening, a part of her mind said to herself, wow, he's being so kind. He's not giving me any grief. He's not asking for anything. He's just helping me. Every day, he's just helping me. Doing little tiny things like while I'm checking out, all of a sudden I get a phone call from somebody, 700 miles away, so I can't put it down, and he's helping. And then the phone call goes on 45 minutes more than I said it would, and he's helping. So we had a brief conversation for a moment or two before I came in here of Well, how do you make sure you think that? Like, how do you train yourself to notice kindness? How do you make that a mindfulness? And how then do you use that mindfulness and say, I see you and thank you? That again to me is religion. That's what, there's no point otherwise. We can be selfish, individual whatevers without religion. We can be self-absorbed and in a hurry and indifferent. We don't need a faith tradition to do that. But the mindful practice of who's kind? Where do I see it? And how do I make sure I acknowledge it? Not just see it, but you have to train yourself. You have to train yourself to take the picture of it. So Max showing up in sweatpants and a t-shirt with whatever his clerical thing on top of it, that's a picture in my head that will never go away. Because that's kindness. So if he can't do that, then what difference does it make if he stands up here and reads a book? Like, big deal. Lots of people read books. And I don't care what the book says. It's whether you can do it that makes you religious. But like everything, it starts with attention. What are you training yourself to pay attention to? And if you are in a church, what do you believe that the spiritual underpinnings or the God of that church wants you to pay attention to model that church's values? Because that's what we're doing here. Reading a little passage means nothing. You've all read lots of passages. But living it, moments, the moments, the attention, thank you. The noticing, thank you. And this woman is, she hasn't had always the easiest marriage. I've been married like 40 years, so I don't know anybody who's been together 40 years who would say it's always been the easiest. I mean, that's a long time. But for her, how do you make sure that you don't miss what it is the partner brings? Well, you have to pay attention, and you have to make it important. Otherwise, you're not going to pay attention. So you can get values here that help you align with what's important to you so you can see it. If you believe in a God of abundance, then you better look for it. Because that God's not going to show up and give you like an accounting of their abundance. You have to look for it. And it has to matter to you. Otherwise you won't find it. These are the religious practices, the simple, day-to-day, hour-to-hour, mindful awareness of what is important to you. If you want to be forgiving, which is what I've taught for decades, you have to pay attention to the good. Otherwise, the negativity of the world will overwhelm you. You have to. Otherwise, you will rightfully be jaundiced and a little bitter. If you don't bring your value proposition to, I really, really, really need to count my blessings. because otherwise I see the world out of alignment. It's very easy to see what's wrong, and there's so much wrong. That's always true, will never not be true. But that doesn't define your perception. You define your perception. There was I remember this, and I probably said this here over, somewhere in the past 20 years. I remember listening, say 5 years ago, but it might be more than that, to, I think it's Tony Boyle, the priest in Los Angeles, who created a ministry bringing the red and the blue gangs together. And his story was so inspiring when I heard it. Just, excuse me, just like when you see true human beauty, inspires us all. When you see somebody who took his own limitations and started finding a beautiful purpose. And, I'm probably more secular than not, and this is a priest. But he got up on the stage, and it was a group that I belonged to giving him an award. And he's standing up there, and, he's gotten enough awards, but he talked about that this was the moment that was like, wow. He talked about being in his church as a new priest. And the church was in the middle of South Central Los Angeles, which is a pretty dangerous spot. And there was all this violence going on near his church, but he was afraid to go out, and 6 months goes by, and he's thinking, okay, I'm a priest here, but I'm not doing any priesting, because I'm afraid to go out, and it's violent, and I could spend the next 20 years, counting my rosary beads, but I'm not doing anything. So that thought gets in there, and he starts to pray to his God. Well, what do I do? Because I'm a priest and I took the job to serve you. I can't imagine that all you want me to do is spend my day hunkered in here, afraid, in your church. So what he came to was, I'm a minister. I'm here to help my God in his world. That's what he came to. It's not my world, it's his world. And my job is to do what my God would like me to do to help his world. So I have to do something, otherwise I better resign this commission or whatever it is, because they got to be able to find somebody better than me. So he says to himself, well, if I believe in this God, and I believe it's this God's world that I'm serving, I better go do it. So he arranges a meeting between these warring gangs, and he agrees to at least mediate a conversation. And he is scared to death. So I don't know enough about it, but he said it came with 7 clerical collars and 14 things around me and 8 crucifixes, and I'm walking around like this. See, I'm religious, don't hurt me. It's and don't mistake me for anybody but a priest. And and he's using his cross, these crosses as protection. And he's shaking and tells them, I'd like to help, because that's what I need to do to bring my religion to life. Otherwise, I'm just sitting in a church helping nobody. And I guess the 14 crucifixes made them feel that they don't want to hurt him and everything. And they sat down and talked. And then he created Homeboy Industries, and all this stuff. But it started because he needed to find a tangible expression for his religion. That simply leading people in prayer and reading the appropriate thing for the week, but staying protected and scared and safe, was not being religious. And we all have that. For me, maybe it's not a religious question, it's a purpose question. But we have such a need to bring our values to some expression. And for the religiously oriented, it needs to be in some alignment with the values, goals, and teachings of the religion. Otherwise, like Tony Boyle, you don't really believe it. From my more secular, part of me, which is as a researcher, it's like that simple question of, at least, how do I be a little kinder? This much. If my partner does something to me, how do I make sure I notice? But that's my religion. How do I make sure I notice? Or if somebody offers me something, how do I make sure to say thank you? Not just, it would be a nice thing to say thank you. It would, how do I make sure I practice my religion and say thank you? How do I do something of value? Or for my work, forgiveness. How do I make sure that the next time somebody I love screws up, I forgive? Don't matter what Jesus did. He already did his piece. Can I? In my little tiny world. When I think of what is, what do we do here? I talk at medical conferences and law stuff, and I come into churches and I speak to all sorts of groups. They each have a purpose. And the purpose here should be inculcating kindness and goodwill. That's its purpose. Well, you have to act that way. That's how the organization and the learning matters, is if you act it. It's funny, I do try in my small way to, I'm not indifferent to religious writings and ideas, I know that I'm a secular, you call me from Stanford, not from, a religious thing. But this morning I was just looking for what would be a quote that might trigger my thinking to help me, just as I'm driving, trying to figure something out, because I never really talk with an agenda. But the quote that I came up with was that, and my knowledge of the Bible is minimal, but it was that quote that, Jesus tells everybody, I'm here for the sick, not the well. And that seemed pretty fundamental, because we're all sick. But that quote was the entree point to what you just heard came out, was Jesus made very clear. If you're fine and you're loving and kind and gracious and in tune with God, you don't have to go to church. You don't need what we have to sell because you already got it. But if you're not that way, that's what his message is for the 99.99% of us who are lacking and off and limited. And the place that this all came from was it requires us to recognize with some humility what we need. You know, we all need the reminders that a place like this should offer in kindness and gratitude and forgiveness, because we don't do it enough. We're off balance. We're ill. And the central figure of this path, that's what he's saying. You know, if you guys were fine, you don't need me. But we're not fine. And the world's not fine. And so, like, when I think of this church, I do think in part of, like, Father Mac coming in a pair of sweatpants, because that's quite a statement of a church's goodwill. Welcoming, you know, that whole idea of inclusiveness. But that piece underneath it, and this is where I'll stop, is that humility, that recognition that I need something that a church and its teachings offer, because I may not be able to do it just on my own. I need reminders and guidance and support. And that's healthy. You know, that recognition. Anyway, thank you. It's always nice for me to come here and talk, and I do like coming to St. Helena a couple times a year, so thank you very much.